The phone rang just after 7 in the morning, which was unusual. My son-in-law never called me. In 3 years of him being married to my daughter, he had never once dialed my number directly. It was always Claire who called, always Claire who texted, always Claire who remembered my birthday or checked in after a doctor's appointment. So when I saw Derek's name on my screen that Tuesday morning in October, I felt something cold move through me before I even answered. I was standing in my kitchen, still in my robe, holding a cup of coffee I'd just poured. The steam curled up in the cool morning air. Outside my window, the big oak tree in the backyard had started to turn, the leaves edging from green into rust and gold. I'd watched that tree change color 31 times from this exact window. 31 autumns in this house. I answered on the third ring. Margaret. His voice was the way it always was, efficient, a little flat, like someone working through a to-do list. Good. You're up. Claire and I have been talking, and we've made some decisions. We think it's time to move forward on the house situation. We've already spoken to a realtor. She can do a walkthrough this Thursday. I set my coffee cup down very carefully on the counter. I'm sorry, I said. A walkthrough of what house? Your house, Margaret. A brief pause, as if he found my question slightly tedious. We've been over this. You're 68 years old. You're alone out there. And this place is too big for one person. The realtor thinks we can list it at $480, maybe $495 if we do a few updates first. Claire and I talked to the bank last week. We have a plan. I stood very still. Through the window, a cardinal landed on the oak branch closest to the glass. Bright red against the gold leaves. Derek, I said slowly, I never agreed to sell my house. You've been saying for 2 years that you feel isolated out there. This is the logical next step. We've done the research. There's an assisted living community, 20 minutes from our place. It's very nice, very modern. Your monthly would be covered if we sell the house and invest the proceeds wisely. Another pause. We've already put down a deposit to hold your spot. The director said we need to confirm within 30 days. I heard him say a few more things after that. Something about square footage, something about the investment market, something about how Claire was worried about me falling. I heard the words, but they seemed to be coming from very far away, like a radio playing in another room. I'll call you back, I said. Margaret, there's really nothing to discuss. I'll call you back, I said again, and I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long moment. Then I picked up my coffee cup and walked to the kitchen table and sat down in the chair by the window, the one I'd sat in every morning for 31 years. The cardinal was still on the oak branch. He tilted his head and looked at me with one small bright eye, and I looked back at him. I thought about the deposit Derek mentioned. 30 days. I thought about the word proceeds and the phrase invest wisely. And I thought about the assisted living brochure that had appeared without explanation on my kitchen counter 2 months ago. I thought I'd misplaced it. Assumed I'd picked it up somewhere and forgotten. But now I understood. I finished my coffee. Then I went upstairs and got dressed. And I called my daughter. Claire answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been waiting. Mom. Her voice was careful and gentle in a way that made my chest tighten. Did Derek call you? I wanted to be the one to. We just thought it would be easier if he explained the practical side first. Claire, I said, when did you put that deposit down? A silence. It was refundable, she said finally. We just wanted to hold the spot in case you. Without asking me. Mom, we've been talking about this for 2 years. You said yourself the yard is too much. The house is too big. I said the yard was a lot of work some days. That's different from selling my home. The realtor said, Claire. I kept my voice level. I had spent 30 years as a high school English teacher. I had stood in front of rooms full of teenagers who were convinced they knew more than I did. I was not easy to talk over. I want you to listen to me carefully. I am 68 years old. I am in good health. I drive myself everywhere I need to go. I cook my own meals. I pay my own bills. I have never, not once, asked either of you to manage anything for me. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? A longer silence this time. We're just trying to help, she said. and her voice had gone small in a way that reminded me of when she was 9 years old and had broken the kitchen window with a baseball and tried to tell me the wind had done it. "I know," I said, "but this is my house, and I am not selling it." I heard her breath catch. Then I heard Derek's voice in the background, low and quick, and Claire's voice murmuring back. And then she said, "Can we come over Saturday? Can we just talk in person?" "Of course," I said. "Saturday is fine." After I hung up, I sat with the phone in my lap for a while. The cardinal had flown away. The oak tree moved slowly in the morning breeze. Here is what neither of them knew. 8 months earlier, I had been sitting in this same chair reading the newspaper when I came across a story about an elderly woman in Ohio whose son had taken out a home equity loan against her house using a power of attorney she didn't remember signing. By the time anyone discovered it, the money was gone and she was facing foreclosure on a home she'd lived in for 40 years. The reporter noted that cases like hers had increased significantly in recent years. There was a quote from an elder law attorney named Patricia Holloway, and the quote said, "The single most important thing an older adult can do to protect themselves is to understand exactly what documents they've signed and to make sure their estate plan reflects their actual wishes, not someone else's." I had read that quote 3 times. Then I had called my own attorney, a man named Robert Baines who had handled my late husband Gerald's estate and who I trusted completely. I told him I wanted to review everything: my will, my deed, any existing powers of attorney. I told him I wanted to understand my options. What followed were 2 meetings at Robert's office over the course of March and April. He walked me through everything slowly and clearly. "I was sharp," he said. "I understood it all quickly." By the end of April, I had done 3 things. First, I had updated my will. Second, I had established a revocable living trust and transferred the deed to my house into that trust, which meant the house could not be sold without my explicit written consent as the trustee, not by me in a confused moment, not by anyone claiming to act on my behalf. Third, I had revoked the general power of attorney I had signed years ago when Gerald was sick, the one that had named my daughter as my agent for financial matters. I replaced it with a very narrow, very specific, durable power of attorney that could only be activated if I were declared legally incapacitated by 2 independent physicians. Robert had explained all of this to me in plain language. He had also explained what forged meant in the context of real estate transactions, and what the legal consequences were for someone who attempted to sell property they did not own. I had not told Claire any of this. I had not told anyone. I had gone home from Robert's office in April and planted tomatoes in the backyard and made a pot of soup and watched the evening news. And I had felt, for the first time in a while, completely at peace. So when Derek had called me that October morning to tell me about the realtor and the deposit and the assisted living community, I was surprised, but I was not afraid. I was something else entirely. I was almost curious to see how it would unfold. Saturday came with gray skies and the smell of rain. I made a coffee cake because I am my mother's daughter, and I cannot have people in my home without feeding them. I set the table nicely, got out the cloth napkins, brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Claire arrived first, alone, while Derek parked the car. She came through the front door and hugged me longer than usual, and I could feel her trying to say something in the hug that she hadn't managed to say in words. I hugged her back just as long. Derek came in behind her. He was a tall man, handsome in a practiced way, the kind of handsome that had probably served him well in his 20s and had curdled slightly since. He shook my hand the way he always did, a quick, firm grip, efficient. He looked around my living room as though he were already calculating square footage. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured coffee. I served the cake. We talked about small things for a few minutes: the weather, my grandson Tyler's soccer tournament, a movie Claire had seen. Then Derek set down his fork and folded his hands on the table. "Margaret," he said, "I know the phone call Tuesday was abrupt. That wasn't the right way to handle it, and I apologize for that. But the substance of what I said stands. Claire and I have put a lot of thought into this, and we genuinely believe this is the best path forward for your security and your well-being." He reached into the bag he'd brought and set a folder on the table. Inside were papers. I could see the header of what looked like a listing agreement on top. "I took the liberty of having the realtor prepare some initial documentation," he said. "Nothing is finalized, but if you'll just review these and sign where indicated, we can get the process moving before the end of the month." I looked at the folder. I looked at Derek. I looked at my daughter, who was looking at her coffee cup. "Derek," I said pleasantly, "tell me something. Have you ever heard of a revocable living trust?" He blinked. "I what?" "A living trust. It's a legal instrument." I reached over and moved the folder to the side of the table without opening it. "My house was transferred into a trust in April. I am the trustee. The only way this house can be sold is with my explicit written authorization, signed in front of a notary. As the trustee of that trust, a realtor's listing agreement signed by me personally would have no legal effect whatsoever. It wouldn't bind the property." Derek stared at me. "Furthermore," I continued, in the same pleasant tone, "the power of attorney naming Claire as my financial agent was revoked in April and replaced with a document that has very specific and very limited scope. If either of you has a copy of the old document and were planning to use it for anything, I would strongly advise against that. Using a revoked power of attorney to conduct transactions is fraud. That's a felony." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, it had started to rain. Small drops on the window over the sink. Claire looked up from her coffee cup. Her face had gone pale. "Mom," she said softly, "what are you saying?" "I'm saying that I have protected myself," I said. "And I'm saying that my home is not for sale. Not now. Not without my genuine, freely given consent, which I am not giving." I looked at Derek steadily. "I'm also saying that I had a very interesting conversation with my attorney about the assisted living deposit. Did you know that paying a deposit to hold a spot for someone without their knowledge could be considered a form of financial elder abuse in this state, depending on the intent?" Derek's jaw tightened. Something moved behind his eyes, not guilt. Not exactly, but a recalculation. Like a man who had come to a door expecting it to open and found a wall instead. "This is insane," he said, his voice dropping. "We are trying to help you. That's all this has ever been." "Then help me the way I asked to be helped," I said. "Not the way you've decided is best." Claire put her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were bright. "Derek." Her voice was very quiet. "How did you find out about the assisted living place?" "What do you mean?" "I did research. You told me your co-worker's mother went there. You said she highly recommended it." She paused. "But I talked to your co-worker last week. At the department party. I mentioned it to her, and she had no idea what I was talking about. Her mother lives in Florida." Derek said nothing. "And the deposit," Claire continued, and her voice was steadier now. Something clarifying in it. "You said we put it down together. But I never signed anything. I never even saw a bank statement. How did you pay for it?" "Claire." "Derek." She turned to look at him fully. "The joint account. The one with the money from my grandmother's estate." She took a slow breath. "Is that where it came from?" The rain was coming harder now. I could hear it on the roof. A steady, soft drumming. Derek pushed back from the table and stood up. He said something about how no one in this family trusted him, how he had been trying to do what was right, how we were both being irrational. He said it with conviction, with the practiced fluency of someone who had gotten out of tight spots before, by making other people feel guilty for doubting him. Claire sat very still through all of it. When he ran out of words, she looked at him for a long moment. "I think you should go wait in the car," she said. He left. We sat together for a while after that, my daughter and I. The rain came down. I refilled our coffee cups. Claire cried, quietly, the way she'd always cried since she was small, not loudly, but thoroughly, like she was determined to do it properly. I handed her a napkin and didn't try to rush her. "How long?" she asked finally. "I started suspecting something was off about 8 or 9 months ago," I said. "Nothing dramatic, just small things. The brochure appearing in my kitchen. Derek asking me, twice, very casually, whether I had ever thought about simplifying my finances. The way he'd steer conversations toward the house, toward my retirement accounts. I paused. I've been a teacher for 30 years, baby. I know when someone is working towards something. Why didn't you say anything to me? Because I didn't know how much you knew. And I didn't want to be wrong. She was quiet for a while. I didn't know, she said. I want you to believe that. I thought I really did think it was about helping you. He made it sound so reasonable. I know. But the account, she said, and her voice hardened again. My grandmother's money. That wasn't. She stopped. Started again. I need to look at our finances. Yes, I said gently. You do. She looked at me with wet eyes. How are you so calm? I thought about how to answer that. I looked out the window at the backyard. At the oak tree standing in the rain. Steady and dripping. Its gold leaves shining. Because this is my house, I said. I planted that tree 20 years ago. It was barely 5 feet tall when I put it in the ground. Gerald thought I was crazy. He said it would take forever to give any shade. I told him we'd grow old together, the tree and I. I looked back at her. No one is taking this from me. And knowing I'd already done what needed to be done, that's what made me calm. Claire reached across the table and took my hand. In the months that followed, things unfolded slowly, and then, all at once, the way such things tend to do. Claire hired her own attorney and began to untangle the financial situation. What she found was not the catastrophic ruin of a woman whose savings have been drained. Because my attorney had moved fast enough in April, and because the house had been the true prize Derek was after, what she found was still significant. $4,300 missing from the joint account. An undisclosed personal loan Derek had taken out using a credit card in both their names, and a pattern of small withdrawals over 18 months that added up to more than she wanted to say out loud. Derek tried, for about 6 weeks, to explain everything away. He was good at it. He had a talent for making the truth sound like a misunderstanding, for making the person asking questions feel like the one causing the problem. Claire had spent 9 years married to him, and she had gotten very good at believing his explanations. But there is a tipping point in every person's capacity for that kind of belief. And she had reached hers. She filed for divorce in February. I want to be careful here, because this is my daughter's life, and her pain belongs to her. I will only say that I helped her in every way I knew how. She and Tyler moved into the spare bedroom for 2 months, while she found an apartment. I made dinners. I drove Tyler to soccer practice on the days Claire had to work late. I listened on the nights she needed to talk, and stayed quiet on the nights she needed company without words. 31 years in this house, and it had never been fuller than it was that winter. There was a morning in March. Tyler was at school. Claire had just left for work when I walked through the house alone in the early quiet. I went from room to room the way I sometimes do, the way I had started doing after Gerald died, like I was taking inventory of everything that mattered. The kitchen, with its coffee-stained table, and the window where the cardinal comes. The living room, with Gerald's old armchair, that I still cannot bring myself to replace. The hallway, where 3 decades of family photographs climbed the wall in no particular order. Tyler's soccer cleats by the back door because he'd already forgotten them once, and I'd bought a hook specifically to prevent it happening again. I walked out into the backyard in my coat and stood under the oak tree. The first crocuses were coming up along the fence. The garden was still mostly sleeping, brown and bare, but there was green at the edges if you looked for it. I thought about the phone call in October, Derek's voice moving through my kitchen like a cold draft. I thought about all the ways that call might have landed differently. If I had not read that newspaper article in February, if I had not called Robert Baines, if I had been the kind of woman who trusted that people who claimed to be helping her were actually helping her, without checking, without asking questions, without understanding the papers she signed. I thought about the comment I had read once, somewhere an older woman saying, "Never make yourself vulnerable." I had been turning that phrase over in my mind for months. It sounded like fear. On the surface, it sounded like a way of living that kept the walls high. But I didn't think that's what it actually meant. I thought it meant, know your own life. Know what you have and what it's worth and what it costs. Know who holds the keys to your own door. I had known, I had found out in time and I had acted, and I had stood in my own kitchen on a Saturday morning in October, and I had not needed to raise my voice. That was not about being hard or cold or untrusting. That was about knowing myself well enough to protect the life I had built. The crocuses were purple and white, small and sturdy, pushing up through the cold ground with the absolute certainty of things that have come back before and will come back again. I went inside and made coffee and called my daughter, just to hear her voice. Claire found a good apartment in April, 2 miles from me, and Tyler could walk to his school. She came to dinner twice a week. Derek's name came up less and less as the months went by, and the days when it came up with pain attached became fewer than the days when it came up with just a flat matter-of-fact quality, the way you might mention a weather event that has passed. She was going to be all right. I had known that earlier than she had, which is perhaps a thing that mothers know. One afternoon in late spring, Tyler came over to help me in the garden. He was 12 now, growing fast, at that age where he was sometimes a small man and sometimes still completely a child, and you never knew which one you were going to get. That day, he was mostly a small man, asking careful questions about which plants needed what, taking the work seriously. We were weeding the bed along the back fence when he sat back on his heels and looked at the oak tree. "Grandma," he said. "Mom told me a little bit about what happened with Derek." He said his stepfather's name with the careful neutrality of someone who has thought about exactly how much weight to put on it. "She said you were really smart, that you figured it out and protected yourself. Your mother is generous," I said. "She said you did it alone, that you didn't tell anyone." "That's true." He was quiet for a moment, pulling at a weed with steady concentration. "Were you scared?" I thought about it honestly. "Not of losing the house," I said. By the time October came, I'd already made sure the house was safe. But scared of other things? Yes. Scared of being right about Derek. Scared of what it would mean for your mother. Scared of how much it would hurt her. I looked at the oak tree, the new leaves bright green in the afternoon light. Being afraid of things hurting the people you love that never really goes away? I don't think it's supposed to. Tyler nodded, absorbing this. "But you did it anyway," he said. "I did it anyway," I agreed. He went back to the weeding. After a while, he said, without looking up, "I'm glad you didn't sell the house." "Me too," I said. "I like this yard." I looked around at the garden, the fence, the oak tree, the small purple crocuses that had finished and been replaced now by something yellow and cheerful along the south wall. The coffee I had left on the back steps, still steaming, the cardinal or possibly his son, or his grandson. I had never been entirely sure sitting in the oak tree the way he always did, looking at me with one small bright eye. "I like it too," I said. We worked until the light started to change, until the backyard went gold and long-shadowed the way it does in late afternoon, and then I went inside and made lemonade. And Tyler told me about his soccer tournament, and we sat at the kitchen table by the window and let the evening come in slowly. This is my house. I have watched 32 autumns from this kitchen window. The tree, Gerald said, would take forever to give shade, is taller now than the roof line. And in the summer, it fills the backyard with a cool green darkness that I think about all winter. My daughter and my grandson know where I keep the spare key. My attorney's number is in my phone, and his advice is engraved somewhere in the part of my mind that knows what matters. I am 68 years old. I am in good health. I drive myself everywhere I need to go. I am not going anywhere